Okay, welcome everyone to today's Dialogs in Dharma with Dharmic Shakti. We have with us today Dr. Prabhakar Rao. Dr. Prabhakar Rao is really, an inspiration for me. I was privileged to be a part of a training that he had conducted on natural farming. And that whole, training was a moment of awakening for me. In that course, he had provided so much clarity on how scientific our ancient practices were and what we were losing out by no longer following them. And at that point of time, throughout the course, all I could think about was, I wish more people could hear this. So when I decided to start Dharmic Shakti as an attempt to create more awareness about our Indic, knowledge systems, Prabhakarji was one of the first I reached out to, and in his kindness, he has consented to be a part of this conversation. He's currently the chairman of the Sri Sri Institute of Agricultural Sciences, and he's one of those blessed souls who has worked very closely with Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And to me, he's an example of how intelligence and spiritual wisdom, success, humility, all can come together in a single package. He's also a very renowned architect. He's been a part of the team that designed the Central Vista Redevelopment project in Delhi. You might have known about it, the parliament, new parliament design, basically. He also teaches a course on Mandala Vatika, and that course, I can only describe it as sublime, right? It's where sacred geometry meets quantum physics meets Vedic botany. It's truly amazing. However, today I have requested him to talk to us about Vedic knowledge in agriculture and really what was the thinking behind the traditional methods in which India did farming. So thank you, Prabhakar ji, to be a part of this conversation. I'm truly grateful that you found the time to be here today.
Thank you so much, Vanaja. Always a pleasure interacting with you, especially on these podcasts. So let me just ask you a question. If I ask you the question,
yes,
before the Green Revolution began in India, let's say 100 years ago,
yes,
in India,
yes,
what was the farming technology that was being followed before the chemicals came into agriculture?
yes.
Most probably, like 99% of the general public, you would say we were practicing compost and organic farming. Yeah. So the narrative is that before chemical agriculture came, for thousands and thousands of years in India, we have been practicing organic farming. What if I told you that that's not true at all? Because organic farming entered India only in 1940, when Sir Albert Howard, a British gentleman, in the city of Indore in Madhya Pradesh, first created what was called as the Indore method of composting. It's only in 1942, and by 1942, chemicals had already started being used in agriculture. Yes. So, if organic farming came into India only in 1940, and chemical farming around the same time, let's say, what was India doing for agriculture before that? How many of us really ask this question? Because we just generally believe before chemical farming, all that we did was organic composting, farmyard manure, and organic farming. That's what we were doing. In Kannada, we call it tippe gobra, so everything is put into a pit. It is composted over a period of time. It becomes lovely organic manure that you put into the soil, and then you get wonderful chemical-free produce. It's not the scenario. In India, we practiced for thousands and thousands of years a very sustainable method of agriculture, which we know very little about.
That's true.
Today, in the past, yeah, sure.
No, I think that is true of almost every facet of life, right? And that is the dichotomy. You had India, which is a land that everybody wanted to come to. But the feeling that we had is that all technology came to India only after the 1950s, or maybe were introduced by the Britishers, right? So, and the same is true for the agriculture as well, sir. So please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, very true. So, it is but logical. If India had a agriculture technology that supported it for tens of thousands of years. Because, you know, this whole thing that farming started only 10,000 years ago, that's when agrarian settlements happened. That is right now out of the bag. I mean, out into the bin, because enough excavation archaeological evidence has come to show that agriculture was successfully practiced tens of thousands of years ago. We are talking about even before the Ice Age, which happened about 8,000 years ago. Even before that, there is enough evidence across the world, not just in India, to show that agriculture was practiced as a refined technology. So what was it that we were doing in India? You know, when we look at civilizations like those on the Indus Valley, today's Dholavira, Lothal, and all these places in Haryana, of course, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, which are probably better known because of the excavations done by the British there. But if we look at these civilizations, each of these towns, Dholavira, for example, was a huge settlement. You know, it had something like around 500,000 people living there, you know, and that's, you know, it's a huge settlement, but they, you know, they did agriculture in a very sustainable way.
Right.
They didn't have to use chemicals. So what was it that they were doing? How far back does the refined technology in agriculture and food production extend back in time in India? You know, it's a very interesting way to look at it. And then we have to look at it from several angles. One is, of course, archaeology, what it tells us, how far back, because Indus Valley civilization is not just a settlement that happened during one particular time period. It is, there are layers and layers of cities built one on top of the other.
Yes.
So when you dig down, you go not just to 2,000, 3,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, you go to 10,000 years, you go to 20,000 years, you go to 25,000 years, and today archaeologists are pushing it back up to 40,000 years. So, you know, there is something big there. And if we don't learn from what we had sustainably practiced, it's not that at that time population was not there. Very, very high density populations existed around cities, and agriculture was successfully done to support these populations. So it's not that today we have a huge population, therefore chemical farming is required. It's not that. There must have been other technologies to support high density populations. So what are those? That is what we would like to explore in today's podcast.
Yes.
So one is archaeological evidence, because you find grains and you find tools and you find agricultural implements and you find so many things, seeds, etc., which show that farming was done for a very long time. The second one is from our texts, ancient texts.
Correct. Yeah.
So if we look at one of the surviving texts of today, one of the more recent ones, this is around 600 AD. And if we look at this one, this is called Vriksha Ayurveda by Surapala. Surapala was not the writer of this text. He is the one who did a commentary, and it is very nicely written there. It says, I, Surapala, having studied the information of my ancestors, have used it, proved it to be true, and therefore I am speaking about it. He never says that, I mean, that's how commentaries were written in those days. Nobody plagiarized somebody's information. So Surapala, in fact, bases his text, Vriksha Ayurveda, on much more ancient texts. Krishi Parasara, for example.
Yes.
Chanakya's Arthashastra. You have Manu's Manusmriti. You have got Charaka's Charaka Samhita. You've got then the texts of Rigveda with so many chapters on agriculture. So each generation of people who practice the technology, whenever they practiced it, they wrote commentaries on previous knowledge and also gave refinements to those technologies. And in Vriksha Ayurveda, you find this extraordinary treatise. It has 12 chapters, each of them absolute gems. And it talks about everything from conservation of water to management of pests and diseases to soil types, weather. It talks about how plants are classified. Beautiful taxonomy, botanical taxonomy of food crops. Extensive taxonomy is given. It talks about interaction between people and plants. It talks about creating bioformulations like Kunupjala, Panchagavya, and all these Amritas. It talks about ways of cultivation, how plants are cultivated. It talks about how to create mutations and hybrids in plants. I mean, it is incredible. We are not talking about the present day hybrids which have to depend on chemicals, but these are natural mutations which the farmers could, inculcate into the genes of the crops they grew. And they have got beautiful chapters on that. So they've got 11 chapters. And one chapter also talks about landscape architecture, designing gardens, Vastu. And so these are incredible texts of which we have no knowledge at all today. And that is very frightening, because if we are facing global warming and climate change is staring at our doorsteps, we know what's happening to the weather. Bangalore has never seen a summer like we did this year. And it's world over, it's happening. So when we are looking at all this, not to look at the rich knowledge that we had, which served us successfully for thousands of years, becomes, one is in askance. Why are we doing that? Why aren't texts like Vriksha Ayurveda brought out into the open? What is it that we can learn? I mean, I'm not saying that everything there is absolute truth. All I'm saying is there must be knowledge there which one should look at, which can answer and provide solutions to the problems we are facing today.
Perfectly said.
And let me take one example. And this is one of the works that I myself took up. Today, Vanaja, we have a huge problem with a very, very toxic weedicide that we are using in agriculture, which goes under the commercial name of Roundup. Roundup is basically a weedicide that contains an active ingredient called glyphosate. And glyphosate is one of the really toxic chemicals. It is a neural inhibitor, and it is directly linked to autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all the neurological disorders that we talk about. We directly, if you go to Google Scholar Docs and say glyphosate neurological disorders, you will find thousands of papers which directly link the residues from glyphosate weedicides in food, which go and create these neurological disorders in human population. Now, because today manual weeding, getting labor in agriculture, and Vanaja, you know this, you run a farm yourself, you know how difficult today it is to get skilled labor. And, it's very expensive. The productivity is very low. And if you need to actually use human labor to do weeding, it's very expensive. So how can you blame farmers for using, let's say, Roundup to control weeds? It makes economic sense, but it creates a global crisis, because people eating that are going to suffer. Their children are going to suffer from very serious neurological disorders. So I was looking at Vriksha Ayurveda, and I was thinking to myself, why don't I look at these beautiful shlokas that are there here and see whether there is anything that's giving us a pointer towards controlling weeds. And lo and behold, in a chapter on cultivation, there is this lovely shloka which talks about this plant called Araka. Araka is Calotropis. Yeah, it's what we call the Madar plant. We call it Arka, and it's that plant with that very large whitish leaves, grayish white leaves.
They use it for Ganapati also. Ganapati Puja.
Exactly. So the flowers are those violet flowers which we use to garland Ganapati during our Ganapati Mahotsav. So this particular plant, they have analyzed the effect of the exudate from this plant has got a white latex, milky latex that comes out. And they have said in that shloka that if branches are cut and kept in the channels which carry the irrigation water to the plants, weeds are suppressed.
In fact,
and I said, that's wonderful.
So many places when you go down, you will see this actually growing in the boundary, right? I have, because you taught me this when I attended your course. And since then I have been noticing this plant and I have found it actually in the boundaries. But unfortunately, what is happening is today people are cutting it down, calling it a weed, when it's actually a weedicide.
Exactly.
How ironic.
It's very ironic. Yeah, it's very ironic. And, you know, I did a lot of research on a branch of science, modern science, called allelopathy. Allelopathy is basically how plants use chemical exudates to suppress other plants. Yeah, so an aggressive plant growing can actually release certain chemicals in the ground. We are talking about organic, we are not talking about these toxic residues. We are talking about organic compounds, which would actually suppress the growth of plants like weeds. So we did an entire research of how, you know, we conducted a perfect statistical experiment based on a completely randomized block. We used statistical tools like the F value to validate what we call a null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis said that an extract from this calotropis plant has no effect. And because the F value was significantly higher than expected, it goes on to show that H0 is disproved, and the alternative hypothesis, which means it has an impact on the control of the weeds, is validated. So using scientific technology, scientific methodology, we could actually demonstrate that this plant has got something in it which could really substitute glyphosate, which we find in Roundup. Now, this is just one thing that I culled from this text, which is full of gems. It's a trove house of treasure with so many beautiful, that understanding that they have, you know. Yeah. So when we look at texts like Vriksha Ayurveda, and not just that, when we look at the way our ancients approached agriculture, you know, the thought process that they had while doing agriculture is you straight away see why it was sustainable, because they never looked at crops in isolation of the ecosystem. They looked at crops always as a part of the ecosystem. And to further elaborate and validate the point that I'm making, let's just see how they looked at insects, you know, pests, what the modern science called pests, you know. Pests, the moment you utter the word pest, it is something that needs to be wiped out, eradicated. And that's how chemical farming looks at it, right? The moment you see an insect or a worm or anything attacking, the first thing that chemical agriculture does is it formulates compounds with very toxic poisons in it, which will instantly obliterate and kill an entire generations of these insects, so that that species is wiped out. So that's the approach. The approach is to kill, but nature responds aggressively. The moment you try to kill a life form, it will hit back with a mutation. We have seen that happening in antibiotics. We've seen that happening in so many things, and we have seen that happening with insects. You have a pesticide, you put it on the insect, the first generation dies. Next generation develops resistance. Then it develops more resistance till it is immune to the pesticide. What do? You develop a stronger, more toxic pesticide. The insect responds, becomes immune to that. And we have been doing this nearly for, I don't know, 70, 80 years now, developing stronger and stronger pesticides till the pesticide not only kills the insect, but its residue kills the person who's eating the food. So this is a non-sustainable cycle. It's just a vicious cycle where you're pumping food with higher degree and concentrations of more toxic pesticide residues. But how did our ancients look at pest management? For them, first of all living things are creation of the divine. So this thought that I should kill something never entered their heads. For them, it was about coexistence. Every living form has a purpose on this earth. It's come here to serve a certain purpose on this earth. It should be let to do so. So coexistence rather than confrontation. That was the thought process. They never tried to kill the insect. They said, let's try and understand how we can coexist. The insect has to eat. Therefore, it comes and sits on our crops. But if we make our crop inherently less attractive to the insect, instead of sitting and eating on our crop, will go and sit somewhere else and complete its life cycle. Therefore, we developed what we call these astras. Astras are certain weapons, like arrows, but not to kill. Like they developed the neem astra. Now, what was the philosophy here? They looked at a neem plant and they said, hey, on this particular tree, we don't see insects. And why don't we see insects? Because when you take a bit of that leaf and put it in your mouth, you realize how bitter and disgusting the taste is. Not just to you, to the insect as well. So they said, okay, let's take these leaves and let's make a concoction where we extract that bitterness out of these leaves, sprinkle it on our crops. And when we do that, certain types of insects which come, sit on the plant, eat, and then fly away, that's their behavioral pattern. Those insects will sit. When they try to chew the leaf, they will taste the bitterness of neem on that. And they won't like it. They will go away. Now, that's an approach. It's a way of thinking, which is radically different from how we do chemical agriculture. Chemical agriculture, it's go and kill. Whereas here you're saying, what can I do to coexist? So that's how neem astra was created. And neem astra, all that you did was you took that extract of the neem leaves, sprinkled it on your crop, and lo and behold, a third of all known insects stopped attacking your plants because it tasted bitter.
So I used this principle that you taught me because in my farm, I had my main fence. There was a wasp that had built its nest. And we found, so all the neighbors told me, get this pesticide guys to come and kill it. But, I'm your student. So I thought, what would Prabhakar ji tell me to do? And I found out certain aromas which drive away wasps, which they don't like citronella and lemongrass and peppermint. So we created a spray of those and we sprayed it. And it just went, it left. So in fact, the farm boy tried to burn the wasp nest down, but nothing happened to the wasp nest. But once we sprayed this, because we have a lot of bamboo, the house is made out of bamboo, we were able to save the whole thing. So what I'm saying is that this one philosophy which you taught me, I was able to apply it and use it very well in my own farm.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of it, because it's not really a technique, but it is a way of thinking.
Yes, yes.
So but look at the beautiful benefit that you reap. Because you don't kill the insect, the insect has no incentive to mutate and develop resistance. And therefore, it continues. Your neem astra continues to work on your crops. The insect continues to live as before, going and sitting somewhere else and eating its food. And 5,000 years ago, neem astra worked. Now, today, neem astra works, and 5,000 years from now, neem astra will continue to work because the insect didn't have to mutate to develop resistance, because we never wanted to kill it in the first place.
Yes.
This way of thinking, I believe, was what made our agriculture sustainable. Similarly, we had Brahmastra. Brahmastra was meant for insects whose behavioral pattern entailed that they finished their entire reproductive cycle on the plant, which means the insect would come, it would eat the plant, then lay eggs on the plant. The eggs would hatch into larvae, which would continue to eat the plant. The larvae would then pupate, and after that, from the pupa, a new insect would come and fly away. Now, So an entire reproductive cycle took place on the plant. This is the second type of insect based on behavior, for which they developed Brahmastra, where they took nearly 10 to 12 plants on which these insects wouldn't like to sit. They extracted the active ingredients from these leaves by boiling them in Gomutra, which is the cow urine of the Desi cow, one of the best organic solvents known to man. And from that, they created Brahmastra. So when you sprinkle the Brahmastra on the crop, another 1/3 of the world's insects classified on the pattern of their behavior, which complete the life cycle on the plant, they stop coming and laying eggs on the plant. So now 2/3 of the insects have been taken care of by Nemastra and Brahmastra. And we have yet another type of insect species based on behavior. So this class of insects, they come to a plant, immediately get inside a plant. They will burrow into the roots or the stem or the leaves or the fruits, and they will eat the plant from the inside. So they are insects which are like root borers and stem borers, leaf miners, fruit borers, all these insects. So they go and hide inside. So you don't even see them. For that, we had something called the Agniastra. And Agniastra was this very pungent astra that was made out of garlic and tobacco and chili and, boiled in Gomutra, and these active pungent compounds extracted. When that is put on a plant, even if the insect is sitting inside, it can't withstand the pungency. Therefore, it comes out and flies away without damaging the plant. Again, intention was not to kill it. Intention was to make it go away or not come and sit on the plant. Which is why, therefore, for the third class of insects, you have the Agniastra. So you have Nemastra for the first behavioral category, where it comes, eats and goes. And then second one, Brahmastra for that which comes and finishes the life cycle. And then Agniastra for the one that comes and bores inside the plant. 3 types of insects and 3 types of astras, you're done. It's a very, very sustainable method of pest management where you're not killing. Therefore, all these astras worked in the past, work today, they will work in the future, because the intent has never been to kill the insect. Therefore, the insect did not have an incentive to mutate. And therefore, you've got a perfect win-win. The insect continues to live, we continue to harvest our crops. So this kind of understanding, which our texts like Vriksha Ayurveda have embedded in them, these are extraordinary resources in understanding sustainable agriculture in our ancient times. And this is what was practiced right across the world. This is what was practiced.
So you talked about, all the solvents, the solvent being used itself is coming from the cow. The cow has been a very important part of Indian agriculture. And, unfortunately, because of the machinery coming in, the use of the cow has kind of, dwindled. Can you, for the audience, give them a little brief about what are the ways in which the Indian cow has been very critical to maintaining soil fertility and, the overall agricultural cycle?
Well, that's the heart of natural farming, which we call Vedic agriculture. Now, Vedic agriculture, first of all, destroys this myth of what we call the soil test report.
Yes.
Now, any person who across the world, any person who wants to start agriculture, if he goes to an agriculture scientist or an advisor, first thing he will be asked is, have you got your soil tested? And if he hasn't, they will please send your soil to the test laboratory and get your soil tested, because we want to know what is lacking in your soil or what is in excess in your soil, so that we can guide you to how to stabilize the soil for various crops. And the soil test report, like a blood test report, it tells you what is the expected value and what value your soil has, and therefore how many bags of urea you need to put, or how many bags of NPK you need to put, or SPP, or muriate of potash, or whatever. It tells you what all to bring and dump into the land for you to get adequate and yields in agriculture. Now, the supposition here is the soil itself contains nothing. Everything has to be put in externally. And once the crop is harvested, every season it has to be replenished by putting in fertilizers from outside. Now, when you look at a forest, you go to the Western Ghats, you look at the forest there, and everything is growing in such perfection, the entire greenery, the entire plant life, the entire vegetation, the entire flora, fauna, in such beautiful abundance and equilibrium, everything is getting established. Who goes and puts urea there? Who goes and puts NPK there? Nobody, right? Now, how does it happen then? How do such gorgeous forests thrive in these environments as long as we don't go and destroy it? They thrive. How do they thrive if every season we had to add fertilizer? It doesn't make sense, right? So there must be some way that the fertility required for the plants is being released by soil itself. The soil must be a reservoir of huge quantities of nutrients, which, albeit in a bound form or chelated form, they are held as minerals in the soil. But when the plant requires, there must be some mechanism by which they are released to the plants. And the key here is what we call nutrient solubilizing microbes. Azotobacter, nitrobacter, trichoderma. We have so many species of, we've got potash solubilizing bacteria, we've got phosphorus solubilizing bacteria, iron solubilizing bacteria. Every element known to provide a plant nutrient for growth, there is at least one family of bacteria which solubilizes these nutrients from the minerals that are present in the soil. So what we look at as stones and, soil particles actually are loaded, loaded with nutrition. Unfortunately, they will not appear in your soil test report because the soil test report gives you what is soluble, either in water or a weak acid or alkali. Whatever is soluble, it captures and then tells you go to the market and bring the rest. But when you take that aside, the soil itself is a huge reservoir of nutrients, which will be made available when the plant requires it through the interaction of the nutrient solubilizing microbes. So the structure is the plant sends a message to the microbes and say that it says it requires nitrogen, it requires copper, it requires iron. The microbes then of that particular family, which does that particular element, it works on the minerals, gives that nutrient to the plant. The plant in return gives the microbe a molecule of sugar. That's the symbiosis. And this is a beautiful system because this ensures that the nutrients stay in the soil till the plant needs it. The microbes will only release the nutrient when it is required, the nutrient that is required, and in the quantity that it is required, so that it stays in the soil, not gets washed to the rivers and then enter the sea. When we put chemical fertilizers, most of it gets washed off. It just enters into our aquifers and it just goes off into our river streams and ends up in the ocean, or urea sublimates into the air.
Oh, it pollutes the lake, right?
You
and
have
you get
this
those.
wonderful,
Yeah.
exactly. So when we use these nutrients, and that's what happens in virgin forests, it's the solubilizing nutrients which are working day and night, providing every plant what it requires. And that's why you see this beautiful abundance of nature and greenery in these regions. Natural farming is nothing but allowing nature to do your agriculture in your farm. You step out, let nature do what it knows best, what it has been doing for millions of years. That's natural farming. Now, the question is, where do these microbes come from? And these microbes are very important. They're important to us also. You think that when we eat some food which is high in iron or high in potassium, we take it and it's absorbed by our blood? No way. There are microbes in our gut, in our intestine, which when the body signals that it requires this particular element, these microbes will break the food, take those in a soluble form. They make these nutrients into a soluble form. Then it crosses the intestine wall enter into our bloodstream. If the microbes are not there, we will be forever undernourished, because our body directly cannot take. Same thing with the plants. It requires the microbes. So where do these microbes come from? These microbes, they inhabit the gut of the cow. They inhabit the gut of every animal, actually. Whether it is a buffalo or a cow or a horse or an elephant or a goat, they are. But for agriculture, the one and only one animal species which has the complete spectrum of microbes that are required for agriculture, the complete spectrum, that is only one animal scientifically called Bos indicus. Bos indicus is nothing but what we call the Desi cow. And the Desi cow is characterized by that hump. The cow has a hump. All bulls have a hump of any breed, but a Desi cow will have a hump. It has a very loose blanket-like neck, and it's got very soft doe-like eyes. So all our Sehwals and the Gir cows and our Tarparkars and our Ongol and all these varieties of Indian cows, their gut will have the complete spectrum of nutrients required for agriculture. So while other species of herbivores may have 60%, 70%, 75% of the microbes which solubilize nutrients, the complete 100% spectrum comes only from the Desi cow. Therefore, this is the key. This is the only animal known to man where you get the complete package. You want to do agriculture using microbes, which is our Vedic agriculture or natural farming. The source will have to be the cow dung of the Desi cow. And that is why protecting the Desi cow becomes very important. If you look at our ancient cultures like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, you will see the seal of Mohenjo-daro. You will see that it is a cow. The Westerners call it the bull. It's not a bull. It is actually a cow. If you look at that seal closely, it's a cow. It's not a bull. And it is a cow with a hump, which is the Desi cow. They revered it. They gave it such high status because they knew that it was the key to prosperity, because prosperity came through agriculture in those days. That was a key earner, for any economy. So the Desi cow was revered from very, very long ago. In fact, Kamadhenu, according to our Vedic traditions, Kamadhenu was actually gifted to humanity. And the derivatives of the Kamadhenu today are known as our Desi cow breeds. And Kamadhenu again has this beautiful hump on it. Now, understanding that is why we need to save this particular animal is very important. Because today what happens is protecting the Desi cow is a politicized game. It's confused with Hindutva. Gorakshan equals Hindutva. And therefore, there is a lot of opposition to it. But if you strip all that out and just look at it as an animal which will provide you the complete spectrum of microbes required to release nutrients in natural farming and Vedic agriculture, a sustainable agriculture technique, it takes a whole different meaning. So just like Desi cows, Desi seeds again become very, very important. See, because chemical farming, I myself did my doctorate in plant breeding. We plant breeders are taught from day one, whenever we start our breeding program, the first gene that we look at is a gene which is known to impart highly efficient nutrient uptake, which means how quickly can it uptake nitrogen from the soil and also the other nutrients, but mainly nitrogen. So nitrogen uptake efficiency, the gene for nitrogen uptake efficiency is the first gene that I will put in. And therefore, the moment I have created a hybrid, that hybrid cannot grow unless I provide urea to it, because natural processes of nutrient solubilization through microbes cannot supply nitrogen at the rate at which these hybrids require it.
In fact,
therefore, it is like, it's like fast forwarding, the birth of a baby. I mean, you pump some hormones and instead of 9 months, you're trying to take it out in 6 months.
In fact, the steroids for the plant is basically the urea.
Yes. It's like a steroid. Absolutely. It's like a boost, So when as a result of that, what happens with hybrids is, of course, when you put urea, they respond. There is immediate growth. There is vegetation. There is the whole biomass increases profusely. And it looks like a very healthy plant, but it's not, because inside its resistance is so low. It's like a formula. It's like an infant brought up on formula food. Looks very nice, looks very chubby, but one little wind and cold breeze, it'll fall sick. Inherent resistance is very low. And that's what happens with hybrids. So with hybrids, you put urea, it responds with biomass, but then it becomes susceptible to pests and diseases. So pests and diseases attack, and then you use pesticides and insecticides and weedicides and bactericides and fungicides, and then you have yield. But then that yield you eat, and then you fall sick. I mean, that's not a sustainable cycle.
But you have a $1 billion industry because
it's an industry.
That, right?
Of course, it is an industry. Of course, it is an industry.
You have the seeds,
and that works because when you fall sick, the same companies also manufacture the medicines that you require.
Right.
So it's
people don't realize this. They don't realize this.
It's a whole chain. It's really one of the scams that's staring you on your face every day. But we don't really think about it because we are doctored. Our news is doctored so that we don't think about that.
In fact, very surprisingly, Prabhakarji, after I did your course, I looked for books which could talk about the cow, which could talk about the the microbes within the cow. I looked for the whole connection between the soil and the microbes in the soil. I found very little information, very little mainstream books. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I mean, you will have to join the dots. You see, if you look at a lot of research that was done between 2005 and 2015 in Australia, if you take up any of the Journal of Soil Sciences from Australia, like the Australian Journal of Soil Sciences, you will find number of research papers on nutrient solubilization by microbes. So that's one data point. You look at research that's coming out of several universities like Kurukshetra University, PAU, Punjab, Ludhiana, Punjab University, Punjab Agriculture University in Ludhiana, at Hisar, with the Haryana State University, GB Pant University, my alma mater, at Pantnagar, and several, even TNAU, Coimbatore. You find several of them have done bioassays of the Desi cow dung, the microbes in the cow dung.
Right.
That's another data point. Now, the thing is, we have to join the dots. If we look at the spectrum, which we call TUs, taxonomic units, so you have a pie chart with all the different families of microbes, that are found in the Desi cow dung, and then correlate it with the microbes which are doing soil solubilizing in the Australian journals of soil science. You can join the dots. So it's really that we have to join the dots. It's not that research or information is not there, but they have not been collated together in a comprehensive or a coherent manner. So the idea of this podcast is to do that. I mean, is to bring coherence into data points which are there in the digital domain and media domain, but to bring them together to make a coherent storyboard. So that is why we need the Desi cow, and that is why you can't use a Holstein Friesian cow hybrid to do natural farming, it doesn't work. And Desi seeds are important because Desi seeds have got inherent resistance. They are like street dogs or country chickens. They're very hardy. You feed them, you don't feed them. There's rain, there's cold, there's heat. It'll still do its job. It'll still bark at night, protect you from protect your neighborhood. But so they are very hardy. Therefore, we are going to combat climate change. You require these species. And unfortunately, hybrid seeds have pushed all other indigenous seeds out of the market. Today, all vegetables that you can buy in the market are hybrids or GMOs. That's it. You don't find Desi seeds. So today it's imperative, just like we want to save the Desi cow, we have to save the Desi seeds. And that's my passion. That's what I do at HariyaaleeSeeds.com, where I endangered vegetable seeds, I source them, I trace them, I test them, I stabilize them genetically, environmentally, and then put them online for anybody who grows. Intention only being that we don't want these species to go extinct. So these are very, very imperative tasks that we have to be a part of, and each of us can be a part of that. Anybody who multiplies Desi seeds, and anybody can multiply Desi seeds. Hybrid or GMO you can't, but Desi seeds you can. You can grow one tomato plant from one seed, from one Desi seed, and lo and behold, you can have 1,000 tomato seeds from that plant and distribute it with your neighbors. Make sure that that variety never goes out of this planet. So we all have responsibilities which we can do. Even if we have one pot in a balcony, we can still become a seed saver. And that, I believe, it's now more than ever more important that we do this, because we are not looking at the next 20 years or 50 years to see the extinction of the indigenous seeds. Already in the past 100 years, we have lost 99% of our biodiversity in terms of food crops, and it will continue. And if we don't do something about it, we lose the indigenous seeds, and then we will become slaves to the hybrid and GMO seed companies, because they will have the seeds, nobody else will have seeds. Therefore, I think these are all challenges that we need to look at. And if we are looking at combating climate change and what the future has in store for us, loss of biodiversity and climate change and all that, then sustainable agriculture will have to be the foundation on which that war is fought.
Thank you, Prabhakar ji. I know it's past time and it's pretty late in the evening for you too, but I think this is a very great start to just understanding this whole piece on not just the problems of agriculture today, but really where the solutions exist in our, our ancient wisdom, right? Not just the texts. And I think that is, really what we are trying to do here at Dharmic Shakti, because first, to get people to come out of the mindset that we don't have any knowledge, we need to show them some examples, and you give some wonderful examples. Second is to get them, encourage them to understand, because they can't go to such texts and look for pesticides. They won't get it, right? Because the thought process is not like that. They need to understand the mindset with which, we approached life as a people. And then, of course, the language barrier is anyway something that can be overcome, because today we have lots of translations. But I think this is a great start. Thank you so much. There's so much more I want to talk to you about, but I don't think we will be able to finish. And there's, it's always a pleasure to listen to you speak. So on that note, I wanted to thank you. And just before we go, a last piece on this whole sustainability thing, right? You talked a lot about our approach to farming was sustainable. What is your take on the definition of sustainability today? Do you think they even understand it?
I think sustainability today has largely been misrepresented, because what is sustainable for, let's say, A, in that person's context, it might appear sustainable. But when you look at it in a larger context, sustainability may not make any sense at all. Like the example we were discussing before the podcast about somebody using the complete plant, every part of the plant is used, and then that's touted as a very sustainable way of using the plant. But is that so? I mean, what do you leave behind? You're taking out something, but what do you leave behind on that piece of land? When you look at it from that context, that doesn't look very sustainable at all. It looks extremely greedy and it looks extremely exploitative. So I believe we need to go put ourselves back into the shoes of our ancestors, need to look at the whole thing 360 degrees, understand that we are a part of an ecosystem.
Yes.
We are one cog in the entire ecosystem. And if we pretend that we are the center driving everything else, I mean, it's going to end up in grief for us. And we have already seen the examples of that grief descending on us. So I think understanding sustainability is being mindful.
Yes.
And I think being aware and being mindful, if one can inculcate mindfulness and awareness in what one is doing, and this could possibly extend, not possibly, it should extend to everything other than agriculture as well. And our ancients knew that. They knew mindfulness and they were aware people.
In fact, the very definition of Dharma, right? And that's why we've called ourselves Dharmic Shakti, is that Dharma is all about sustainability. Dharma means that which sustains. And Dharma is about how do you look at the rest of the world? How do you look at yourself with respect to everything else in the world around you, right? So how do you take those actions, as you rightly mentioned, not just from I, me, myself perspective, but in terms of how does it affect everybody around me? And when you take such decisions, then you get truly dharmic or sustainable kind of actions.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you.
So thank you so much, Prabhakar ji. It's been always a pleasure and a great learning experience. Thank you so much for being on, and hopefully, I hope you'll find time to come and talk to us about other things as well. But thank you so much, and thank you to the viewers for listening to us.
Thank you, Vanaja, and very honored that I should be your first guest on this series. I wish you all the very, very best for a very successful and sustainable podcast, that you're doing. So this media platform, lots and lots of blessings from my side for its success. Thank you, and thank all your viewers. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.